Welcome to Legislative Updates. I'm your host, Doug Thompson, with, as always, my co-host, John Barker, representative from the 70th District, covers the Abilene area and more. And John always brings a special guest in, and this week he has brought Senate Majority Leader Jim Denning. And Jim, it's always good to have you back here, buddy.
Thanks for having me back.
Always appreciate it because you come in with a wealth of information. You always have some charts and some things that just helps to break it all down for us. And so, John, the legislature's out of session right now, so fill us in.
Oh, we're just watching the governor as she signs bills that we've passed. You know, she signed one of my bills this week, Senate Bill 53, which had to do with emergency medical technicians and being able to help them in some areas. They had pushed it. We got it through. The governor did sign it. She also signed a House Bill 2290, which was the Criminal Justice Commission reform, which will go in and explore the sentencing grids that we use under the, because I'm on the Kansas Sentencing Commission. We've had some disparities there, and we're going to address those issues. So I was glad to see that she signed that bill. Disappointed today, and Jim and I are going to talk about that. She vetoed Senate Bill 22 for the second time. This is the one that has the tax increase because of the federal government's tax cut last year. And so I know Jim's got a few comments about it. I'll have a few comments about it. I think it's a shame because you know, Kansas taxpayers who pay state income taxes will pay more taxes now without the legislature voting. Well, I guess we have voted to reduce it or put it back to what it was last year, and the governor wanting that money to spend and vetoed the bill. And Jim, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I am too disappointed that Governor Kelly vetoed the big tax bill. It was House Bill 2033 the second time. Mm-hmm. And we had tried to compromise with the governor. We had got the fiscal note down below $100 million, and she had signaled that she would consider signing that bill if it was below $100 million. And we had, I think the fiscal note was down to $85 million. That's an important number, and I'll come back to it in just a second. But you have to remember that this bill had many important things in it, and some of them that she actually campaigned on. I think the most important thing in the bill was that it allowed Kansas taxpayers to continue to itemize.
Right.
So because of the federal tax law, Kansas can't itemize on their tax returns any longer, and it costs taxpayers about $55 million. And then the other piece that the House put in was taking everything that is growth on the internet sales tax to apply that to food sales tax and drive the food sales tax down to zero. Right now we have one of the highest food sales tax in the United States, and Governor Kelly had actually ran on reducing sales tax on food, and we gave her a great bill to let her fulfill one of her campaign promises, and then today she vetoed that bill.
Yeah, and I think that was just a surprise because we gave her just about what she wanted, what she had campaigned on, and then she comes up and vetoes the bill. And I personally believe it's because she wants that additional money from the taxpayers to spend on other programs.
Yeah, you're right, John. She had, you know, remember she said that she would not need a tax increase, and she just passed a tax increase on to the Kansas taxpayers. It was a stealth tax increase, yeah. But we have proof that it truly was a tax increase. The month of April, we just finished tax collections, and it came in $80 million over the estimates, and that is related to Kansans not being able to itemize on their tax returns. So she just passed a big tax increase on to the taxpayers without us having a chance to take a vote on it with this veto of House Bill 2033.
Well, that's disappointing. How has it been to work with a Democratic governor? How has that process gone? Because we have a Republican legislature and a Democratic governor. How's that procedure generally worked?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Well, it's been uneventful. That is to say, I've hardly had any conversation with Governor Kelly since she was elected governor. This is John and my first term serving under a Democrat governor with a Republican legislature. And again, it was very uneventful. She had very little conversation with me and other senators throughout the year. I hardly ever saw her in the Capitol. Just, we had a very structured legislative session that was all driven by the House and the Senate. Very little input from the governor on anything.
And to me, Doug, that's shocking because, we have the majority leader of the Senate, we have the Senate president, that are both Republicans, we have the Speaker of the House and the majority leader, Dan Hawkins. She doesn't have to actually meet with me, but she should be meeting with the leadership. If she wants to get things done, and we've had a couple of several good legislative things that we started in the House that she's taking credit for, though. As you well know, Jim, we've talked about that. But it is different. It would be nice to be, at least our leadership to be at the table.
Yeah, I would think that would be a distinct advantage. All right, we're going to cut away, take a break. You're watching Legislative Updates. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Legislative Updates. I'm your host, Doug Thompson. As you're looking at us on the screen, on your left is John Barker, of course, the representative from the 70th District. And in the middle is Jim Denning, the Senate Majority Leader, and from Overland Park, the 8th District.
That is correct.
I appreciate you being here, Jim. Serving as the Majority Leader for the Senate. Tell me what you feel like was accomplished with the legislature this year and what you're disappointed in with the Senate.
Yeah, Doug, we had a very productive and structured legislative session this year. To put it into a real quick perspective is that we finished 10 days early, and that's really important to note because this is the first year of a 2-year cycle, and usually the first year of the 2-year cycle runs at least 90 days or more, and we were able to finish all of our work, and I think it was 77 or 78 days, 10 days 10 days quicker than...
And saved the state $800,000.
By getting done 10 days early? Wow, that's a tremendous amount.
Yeah.
And the things we accomplished, we came into the session knowing exactly what big items we needed to address, and we ticked off every single one of them with the exception of sports betting, and John's going to talk about that later in the show. But we had that school finance litigation going on for 10, 15, 20 years. And we knew coming back this session that we had to get in front of the Supreme Court and offer them a solution. And it was Senate Bill 16. It was bipartisan support, and they just did the oral arguments, I believe, on May the 9th. Mm-hmm. And just from listening to those oral arguments, it looks like the Supreme Court satisfied with our work, and they too are ready to put this litigation to bed. It's a $90 million price tag. And the big price tag is now we're giving our K-12 schools over $4 billion per year. That's a big number. It's over half of the entire state budget. And this final $90 million, we think, gets us across the finish line. So we're waiting to hear their final decision on that at any time.
And the Attorney General was here last week.
And he
talked about that, and talked about the lawsuit was filed, and it was filed based upon cuts that were made during the Sebelius and Parkinson administrations. They waited until 2010 after Governor Brownback was elected and filed the action then. But what I didn't know, and he brought it to my attention, that since that 2010 and 2022, we will have put in an additional $1 billion from that 2010 mark.
That's correct.
And that's just... Go ahead.
For a total of $4 billion.
Yeah, $4 billion.
The other major things we did was the retirement plan in Kansas is known as KPRS, and historically it's been underfunded since 1993. And for the last 5-6 years, we've really put a lot of money into KPRS and a lot of policy. And this year was no different. We missed a payment back in 17, I believe, in the amount of $115 million. The governor did not want to make that payment. But after we had reformed our tax policy, we had that $115 million in the checking account, and we passed a bill. It was Senate Bill number 9. The governor did not support it, but it passed unanimously in the Senate and the House. Every single legislator voted for that bill. It was the first piece of business that we passed out. So that gave the retirement plan another $115 million, which gets it very, very close to being in the safe zone long term to be able to pay its liabilities. Again, the governor did not support that. She ended up signing it, obviously, with 100% of every legislator voting for it. The other thing that we worked on, we started it last year in the Senate with Senate Bill 352. The KDOT Highway Fund, we had been taking money out of that fund to balance our budget. And the legislature last year left another $60 million in the highway fund. And this year we put another $100 million in. And it looks like the governor, when she gave us her budget, was really following the lead of the legislature. We had passed Senate Bill 350, well, we had introduced Senate Bill 352 last year, then Senate Bill number 1 this year. She just took the language and put it in her budget. And so the highway fund will get healthier and healthier every year. I did bring a small graph that I wanted to share. And this is the amount of money that is going into the highway fund. This is the 60 million, but it ends up being almost 400 million by the fiscal year 24. So that will be a big help, especially to the rural area where we'll start putting our infrastructure money back in. So I wanted to show that to the group. The other major piece that we did was higher education. The governor did not restore their budget cuts from previous years, and the legislature put in another $17 million for higher education. The public safety, our corrections, they were suffering a bit. Towards the end, one of the final things we put in the budget, it came through the governor's request of $35 million for corrections, and we put some from the House. Actually, it was their position to put in some oversight through the Finance Council.
Exactly. We wanted some oversight. If you're going to give someone $35 million additional dollars without any legislative oversight, so we put the LCC in charge of that, so that at least someone's watching where that $35 million is going. Governor doesn't like it, and neither does the Secretary of Corrections, but we felt that we needed some oversight because of the $35 million.
That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
And then one of the final pieces we did on the budget, I know we're getting short on time, but one of the final maneuvers we did is we gave KDOT, the highway fund, another $50 million, and we put a little string attached that the locals would put in 25%. So if their project's not on the 10-year T-Works program, all they need to do is come up with 25% of the project, and then the highway fund must fund the other 75%. So that'll give the local folks a lot more input. And if all they need to do is fund 25% of a project, and the highway fund will fund the remainder.
Well, that's a tremendous boost for the locals that have projects that have been sitting on the table and no funding. So that's tremendous, and that'll help a lot with the economy. And well, good job. Right. We're going to cut away, take a break. You're watching Legislative Updates. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Legislative Updates. I'm your host, Doug Thompson, with my special guest. As you're looking at us on the screen, on your left is John Barker, representative from the 70th District. In between us is Jim Denning, the Senate Majority Leader. And John, before we cut away for break, why we were just getting ready to come back over to you, because there was a bill specifically for Dickinson County. It applies to others, I'm sure, but for Dickinson County, that you had been working on for quite a while to get through.
We worked on it last year. We never got it above the line. It was House Bill 2140. It has to do with our roads and bridges in Dickinson County. Of course, about 5 years ago, there was a vote. It was passed for an additional, I think, 0.5% sales tax, on to be designated for roads and bridges, and it was coming up for renewal. The county commissioners had asked me to introduce the bill last year, and I did, and to extend that to 10 years. So they have to have another vote, but it would be for 10 years. And we were able to get it through, and I noticed that the governor signed it yesterday. So you know, when they were already preparing for the election, but now they'll change it from 5 years to 10 years. So yeah. I was glad to be able to do that for our county commissioners and for our roads and bridges.
Yeah, well, it's an ongoing process because it's now that I've been county councilor for a decade or so, but as I sat in on those meetings, and many times they'll say, well, the roads are deteriorating, and if we can get in and do this work on them, or the bridges at this time frame, it's a huge dollar savings as opposed to further deterioration, and you have to come in, tear a bridge out, and replace it, and the cost is 4, 5, 6
And these
times
are county
later.
roads and county bridges, not state roads.
Right.
So it's used in the county.
Right.
Okay.
All right. Jim, what have you got?
Well, I was going to talk a little bit about next year. We had obviously a very productive session this year, thanks to the House and Senate governing and taking the lead on almost every major project. I think next year we have a few important pieces of unfinished business. John's going to talk about sports betting. We didn't get to it this year. It wasn't ready. The other major topic that we will get to next year is Medicaid expansion. The governor wanted us to work on it this year, and I chose not to for many reasons. The major one being we needed to see what the Supreme Court did with our school finance number. The Schools for Fair Funding, which was the plaintiff's attorney, didn't agree with our number, and they wanted the court to award another $271 million. So we really need to figure out what the Supreme Court rules on before we do our Medicaid expansion. You know, Medicaid in Kansas right now, it's a federal state program, and children, single moms, pregnant moms, the frail and elderly, the disabled, they're all covered under the existing Medicaid. This is a Medicaid expansion program for 19 to 64-year-olds that are able-bodied and some working. So we'll be looking at that program from a fiscal standpoint, but also from a health standpoint. The bill that was passed over from the House that I decided wasn't in the best interest to work had nothing in there about improving the health of the patient. So when the Senate gets done with our work and we send the bill back, it's going to have some things in there, some fiscal things, but some healthy behavior policy as well. The other thing we need to watch next year is Governor Kelly is a spend and tax Democrat. Obviously, she vetoed the tax bill that we talked about. She also tried to re-amortize KPRS, which is the state retirement plan, and short that retirement plan by $145 million so she could continue to spend. And I brought another graph that we'll be paying lots of attention to next year. And this is the checking account of the state. When we closed last session down, we left almost $700 million in the checking account. And the governor, with her proposed budget, you can see she spends it down very quickly. In her third year, she'll actually be in a deficit spending. So obviously that's why she vetoed the tax bill. She wants to use that money to spend rather than to give it back to the folks that were itemizing. And that's why she wanted to re-amortize the retirement plan early. So we'll be keeping our eye on that and making sure that we are, living within our means next year as well.
I kind of remember from one of the earlier shows that we did, Jim, that taking that money out of the KPRS, not making a KPRS payment, would, over a period of time that was projected, would have gone into, was it billion?
It was
billions of dollars, like $7 billion?
$7.5 billion.
Wow.
An additional debt if we had let her re-amortize.
She'd have got the money this year, but we'd have paid for it over the next 30 years at $7.5 billion.
And I remember that there was one, when we were going through this earlier, there was one bill that, had it been signed immediately, would have saved about $25,000 a day. Mm-hmm. Now the bill numbers and things.
Senate Bill number 9.
Yeah.
And
that was a payment on KPRS.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because we were paying interest, and if we'd have paid it a few days earlier, we'd have saved money.
Yeah.
But she waited, I believe, till the last day.
Yeah, it was the 10th day, I remember from an earlier show that we did. Well, John, fill us in on the sports betting one. I know this is a bill that you've been working on for quite a while, so fill us in on it.
Well, it's not a dead issue, as Jim indicated. It just wasn't ripe this year. You've got to get all those parties together, and the casinos have been a little contrary to what we want. They just need to understand that their casinos are owned and operated by the state of Kansas. They don't own them. We allow them to operate them. And so I think next year we will get everybody on board. We'll add some additional revenue to the state, and it's very important that folks out in the rural areas of Kansas will be able to go to their 7-Eleven or their Casey's and whatever. If they want to buy a ticket on a K-State KU game, they'll be able to buy a $5 and take the odds and stuff. So that will, I'm fairly certain that it will probably occur. I know the administration's on board. If we can get the casinos speaking with one voice, that would be good with the 4 casinos. But hopefully, I'm very optimistic that we'll get it done early next year.
Good. All right, we're going to cut away and take a break. You're watching Legislative Updates. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Legislative Updates. I'm your host, Doug Thompson, with my special guest, of course, John Barker and Jim Denning from the Legislature. Jim's the Senate Majority Leader, and John's the representative for the 70th District, which includes Abilene and a lot of other areas. We appreciate the work you guys have put in. I can see since you've been off for a little bit, John, you got pretty tanned up, so you've been out working the livestock on the ground and doing a lot of work.
Working the livestock and cutting grass.
Yeah. Well, Jim, as always, I appreciate it when you come up. You always bring a chart with you, and that always helps to explain it. And thank you for taking the time to come up, because I know you have other things to do. And you told me that you'd been in town, you'd been visiting the Eisenhower Center, and we appreciate that, because that's a gift for the city of Abilene. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time on Legislative Updates.